Hello, and welcome to Day by Day True Crime Stories, the podcast where we explore a different crime or justice milestone from this day in history. I'm your host, Kona Gallagher, and today is June 6th. On this day in 1966, James Meredith, a well-known activist and the first Black student to integrate the University of Mississippi, was shot and wounded while walking down a Mississippi highway. He was marching alone in a quiet but powerful protest that he had called the March Against Fear. The attack could have ended everything, but instead it sparked a massive movement that would help reshape the course of civil rights in America. Today, we're going to talk about James Meredith, who he was, what drove him to start that march, and how an act of violence turned into a rallying cry for change. Let's get started. James Meredith was never one to follow a crowd. He wasn't a traditional activist. In fact, he often kept civil rights groups at arm's length, preferring to make his own path, even when it was the hard one. Born in Mississippi in 1933, James knew firsthand what it meant to live under the brutal weight of segregation. But he was determined to push back, and in 1962, he made national headlines when he became the first Black student to enroll in the University of Mississippi, also known as Ole Miss. It was a historic step, but it came at a terrible cost. His enrollment sparked riots on campus, during which 2 people were killed. U.S. Marshals had to escort him to class, and federal troops were brought in just to maintain some kind of order. For a while there, the university looked more like a war zone than a campus. But Meredith didn't back down. He got his degree, and in doing so, he helped pry open the door for integration in one of the most resistant corners of the country. After graduating, he went on to earn a law degree from Columbia University and settled in New York. But Mississippi, his home, was never far from his mind. By 1966, he had become frustrated with the pace of progress, especially around voting rights and police violence. So he decided it was time to take action again. This time, though, he planned to do it solo. He called it the March Against Fear. The idea was to walk alone from Memphis, Tennessee to Jackson, Mississippi, over 200 miles of highway. His goal was to encourage Black Americans to register to vote and to prove that a Black man could walk in the Deep South on foot and unafraid. But his solitary march wasn't peaceful. June 6, 1966 was a hot summer day in Mississippi. James, wearing a button-down shirt, jeans, and a cap to shield him from the sun, walked alone on Highway 51 near Hernando, carrying an American flag over his shoulder. Not far behind, 41-year-old Aubrey James Norvell had parked his car and hidden in some nearby brush. And he had a shotgun. According to witnesses, Norvell crossed the road and waited silently, watching James. At around 12:15 p.m., he stepped out and opened fire. James was hit with multiple shotgun pellets in the back, the neck, the leg, even in his head. He fell to the ground and crawled to the roadside. Bleeding and stunned, he managed to cry out, "Isn't this a shame?" A photographer captured the moment, and soon that image, Meredith on the pavement, wounded, was everywhere. It shocked the country. And somehow, against all odds, James Meredith survived. He was rushed to a Memphis hospital where doctors worked to remove the shotgun pellets. Thankfully, they all missed his vital organs, and he recovered. And as he healed, the march that he had started alone transformed into something much bigger. The gunman, Aubrey Norvell, didn't try to escape. He stayed at the scene, and when police arrived, he reportedly admitted, quote, "I just wanted to shoot a Negro. It could have been any of them," end quote. It was chilling, but not surprising, especially given the atmosphere in Mississippi at the time. Norvell had no criminal record, but he harbored deep racial hatred. He claimed that he was trying to stop the march, and he wasn't remorseful about his actions. In his mind, he had done nothing wrong. Norville was charged with attempted murder and also faced federal charges for violating civil rights laws. Eventually, he pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison, but he ended up serving less than 3. At the time, many people were outraged. Some thought that his sentence was too light because what he had done was essentially an attempted political assassination. But in the Jim Crow South, even his short sentence was seen as harsh. If Norville's goal was to stop the march, he failed spectacularly. In the days after the shooting, some of the most prominent figures in the civil rights movement stepped in. Martin Luther King Jr., Stokely Carmichael from SNCC, and Floyd McKissick of CORE joined forces to continue what James had started. And people responded. The march grew, and what had once been a one-man mission turned into a mass movement with thousands walking alongside them. They registered Black voters in towns along the route and faced down local resistance. Police blockades, hostile onlookers, threats, all of it became part of the journey. It was during this march that Carmichael gave a now famous speech in Greenwood, Mississippi, where he introduced the phrase Black Power to a national audience. The slogan was provocative and divisive at the time, but it energized a younger generation of activists who were growing impatient with the slow pace of change. James Meredith, meanwhile, recovered from his wounds, and on June 26th, 20 days after he was shot, he rejoined the march for its final stretch. He walked proudly into Jackson with a crowd of roughly 15,000 people, making it the largest civil rights demonstration in Mississippi history. He had started the march alone, but it ended with thousands behind him. James Meredith's shooting was a flashpoint. It was one of those moments when something terrible happens, but it ends up pushing the movement forward. The March Against Fear led to a massive increase in Black voter registration in Mississippi. It also marked a shift in the civil rights movement itself. Nonviolent leaders like King were now walking beside more radical voices like Carmichael, who pushed for self-reliance and empowerment. And Meredith? He stayed true to himself and remained unpredictable and fiercely independent. He didn't really align with any particular group, and over the years, he even supported politicians who baffled his former allies. But he never wavered in his belief in personal agency. In an interview decades later, he reflected on the shooting with characteristic clarity, saying, quote, "I've never felt like a victim. I wasn't walking for civil rights. I was exercising my rights as an American." That's who James Meredith is. Now in his 90s, he remains a powerful symbol, not just of courage, but of determination, of someone who refused to wait for permission to claim the rights that were already his. What happened on June 6, 1966 could have been a tragedy that silenced one man. Instead, it gave rise to a movement. James Meredith may have walked alone that day, but he didn't finish alone. And in the end, his march spoke louder than any bullet. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Day by Day True Crime Stories. If you found James's story compelling, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. It'll help us grow. And be sure to join me again tomorrow as we explore another significant event in true crime history. Until then, stay safe and remember that behind every headline is a life worth remembering. Day by Day True Crime Stories is a Little Monster production.
Hey, you can do it!